Hello and welcome to another Digital Photo Mentor Photo Editing Live. This week we are going to be working on macro photos, and I just need to get that up on my screen. Where are we? There we are. We're going to be working on macro. It's weird talking to myself. And thank you. I believe that is Stephanie's image from last week. We were doing forests, and I thought her forest image of this little mushroom was great. So I used it in our as a featured image this week for macro. So I've got a few close-up images. So macro, close-up, same thing. We're going to be talking about some inherent challenges with doing macro photography and also editing macro photography. Not your image. Okay, I forget. Maybe it was Kelly's. Pardon me, it was Kelly's. Thanks for that, Stephanie. I have your image, Neil. I have yours, Brandon, and I have Marguerite's. So let's dig in. I'm going to switch over to Lightroom, and I've also got the Studio Light, which is Luminar, and that is part of the new Luminar Neo tools. I demonstrated it a little bit last week, and I can show it to you this week if you want, because we do have it available as of tomorrow. So it should be delivered to you tomorrow, and I'm going to be making a video on some tips to use it. So I've done a few examples, but I'll show you how to do such things as you can make some really funky light with it, including adding some color. This is a stock image, and I added Studio Light to this dog, and you want me to go full screen? There we go. Yep. I added some light to this dog using the Studio Light, and you can see that the original was quite bland, and you can actually add color with it. And the tool is now down here under Portrait, but as you can see, it worked just fine on a non-person image, and I even got it to work on things that aren't even living. Okay, so besides the animals. All right, so I'm going to hop back over to Lightroom where we've got our macro photos, and I've already done some experimenting with this moth of Brandon's, because let's go look at the original here. So the original, if we could see, I don't know if you could see the information here, but I'm trying to get can you see the exposure information? Okay. So the question that I had on this one, Brandon, is it was shot at an extremely high ISO of 25,600, right? So I'm curious as to why you use such a high ISO on this one, because it's really grainy, right? If we zoom in, you can see the grain and the noise that's happening here, including the color noise. So this is where you see all these funny colored speckles. That's what's called color noise, right? And you can see it in here as well. There's all these little red and green and different colored speckles. That's color noise. If you can't see it really well, let me see, does that work? Does that help? Now you can really see it, right? Okay, so that's color noise, and it's created, you can hear the machine. The machine's not really on. Rob is saying to check my sound. Let me check my settings for my microphone. Okay, hang on. How's that? Is that better? Better sound? Yes? Okay. Hopefully my sound is better now. When I restart this program, sometimes it changes to the computer microphone, and I have to double check it. So you should be able to see this huge amount of grain here, right? So Brandon, are you still there? I'm curious as to why the high ISO. It was also shot at f13 and a 2,000th of a second. So there's a few things that you can do when you're taking these kinds of photos. And I know that the insects can move quite quickly, but it doesn't look like the moth is flying. Possibly he's not even alive. But anyways, f13. Yes, we're going to talk about macro and aperture, because at f13 it means you have to have a higher ISO if it's dim light, right? So the smaller the aperture, the more the ISO. Same thing with a 2000th of a second, right? So the settings chosen here, let me just see what mode you are in. Shutter priority. Okay, so shutter priority of a 2000th of a second. I'm not sure why it went to f13 and such a high ISO, but that's one of the reasons why I personally don't like using shutter priority, because you can get these kind of wonky exposures and also the super high ISO. So ideally, if you were on auto ISO, it would have gone lower and given you a bigger aperture as well. So it is what it is. This is what you got. And it's a really nice photo, right? You've got some really nice bokeh. If the aperture had been a little bit more open, like f8 even, or f5.6, if you have that on that lens, you would have had even more bokeh, right? So we're going to do a few things, and I've done some experimenting already on this one, because as you could see, there was a lot of noise, right? And I did do a basic edit here, right? So the original was like that, and I just did some edits to bring out the subject a little bit more and darken the background. Pretty standard edits. I've done a vignette, and I did the camera profile, and I also did a mask on the subject just to brighten him up a little bit. You can see I did a little bit of edits there, and I didn't do anything on the background here. Okay, so it was all done with just a simple vignette. Okay. Then what I did was I edited to get the noise reduction. Lightroom has the noise reduction tool under detail, and you can click this button here for denoise, and it now has the new Lightroom AI denoise version. So I did that, and what it does is it makes a new DNG file. So I got this version here, right? And then from here, I applied some additional edits. Let me go back up here. Okay, so I applied those same edits. And I also, did I mask the background on this one? No, same. So I did exactly the same edits as I did to the original raw file. So let's compare these two. So I've got the raw file, and we're using compare mode. Right, I'm just going to switch them. I want to switch them around. There we go. So the raw file is on the left, and the DNG, so that's the noise reduction enhancement, that was done using Lightroom. Okay, so these are both Lightroom so far. And when we zoom in to, this is, well, that's 200%. Let me go back one. Okay, when we zoom into 100%, you could see the noise reduction did a really good job. Okay, so you could see here, right? There's lots of nice detail. You could see the wings. And I was looking at detail in the flower. So do we see all of the little sort of petals and things of the flower, right? It did a really nice job. Okay, so that was the noise reduction built into Lightroom now. Okay, then I did the same thing with Topaz Denoise. Okay, and so let's compare let's compare. Let me get rid of that. Okay, so now we're going to compare Topaz Denoise, which is on the left, with the Lightroom Denoise on the right. Right. So they look fairly similar. There's good detail, maybe a little better noise reduction in Lightroom, also good detail here, right? Kind of some weird artifacting around the flower here, and that's in the Topaz one. Can you see this? So this is artifacts. And otherwise, pretty similar. I'm looking at details in the wings. There's actually a bit more detail here in the Topaz one. Okay. And let's go to the pure green. Okay, they both look fairly similar if we're looking at just the green background. Lightroom, again, looks a bit smoother. So far, Lightroom's denoise is pretty darn good. So now let's compare that to the Luminar's noise. Okay, so what I did was I had to run it through Luminar directly without doing it as a plugin, because I wanted to use the denoise raw, right? So if we go back to Luminar and we pull that image up, where are we? Macro. Okay, so if I come back to Luminar, I need to get the right one here because I've got 4 different versions going on here. Oops, which one is this? Come on. This is the one I've edited, so it looks like this one. I think it's this one. Right, so if I come back in here, you'll notice that there is noiseless raw only when you're on the raw file. And that's where I did the noise reduction. And then I just exported it from Luminar as a TIFF so that we could compare it in Lightroom because it has a better comparison model. So when I'm looking at the noise reduction, definitely Lightroom has some more smoothness here. There's kind of some bumpiness, not some great detail in here. Flower looks okay. Some weird stuff happening there in terms of didn't keep some detail in the flower. So I think of the programs, this one looks pretty decent and the wings look pretty decent, right? Keep in mind, we're zooming into 200% there. So I think if you have any of the 3 programs, Lightroom, Topaz Denoise, or Luminar, you can get a pretty decent version using the tools, right? So because Brandon uses Luminar, I want to come back here and show you what I did with this. So I applied the noiseless raw on high, and then I cranked up the denoise sliders a little bit, right? And if I zoom in and we do a before and after, you could definitely see that it's doing a pretty good job, okay? And if I want to see what it's done, down here, I said it was doing something a little bit weird. Maybe I want to get more detail in here or work with the sharpness here. See, that already looks better, bringing up the detail, but then you start to get the noise back again. So there's this dance that you need to do of bringing this detail slider up because it brings the noise back, okay? Then I did some develop raw and I did the usual. I changed the camera profile to PT, which I think is actually portrait for Sony. And I just found that the color was the best out of all the camera ones. I didn't want to go vivid. Neutral was kind of blah. And I felt this one was a good color. So I went with PT, which I believe is portrait, right? And I did a curves adjustment here, which brought the blacks and the whites in. Okay, so remember to turn your clippings on with the J key. Okay, so I just dragged this bottom one in to get some black, and I drag this top one or this right one in to get some white, just until the white and the butterfly starts to clip, and then back it off a little bit. Okay. I did some adjustments with the black and white sliders to do the same, and also with the highlights and the shadows. Likewise, I turned on auto defringe because I found that there was some chromatic aberration that was showing up here in the wings. Okay, so where that shows up, if I turn that off, I find that one of these things will do a good job, either the chromatic aberration checkbox or the auto defringe. See, chromatic aberration still leaves a little bit of purple haze sort of around the edge there. And I felt like defringe got rid of that a little better. Okay, so I used that. I did a little more noise reduction here. Okay, you could see that what that's doing, it's giving me another boost, but maybe that's where I'm getting the flowers going kind of wonky. Okay, so luminosity noise reduction here as well. Right. And then I added a vignette to darken it, of course, customizing the location. Then I used the details panel to bring back some of the details in this butterfly. Right. So I used the small and medium details and a little bit of sharpening to just kind of bring it back a little bit. You can see it's happening in here. Okay. And then I did a further amount of denoise using the regular denoise tool. So I like that there's so many options in Luminar to use denoise in several places. You've got the original denoise raw, right? I haven't used the noiseless AI extension. I haven't tried that one either. Actually, no, it's this one. Same one. Sorry. Noiseless raw. Okay. So I did the noiseless raw first, did a little bit of denoise in develop raw, and then denoise again using the denoise tool. Right. So I'm pretty happy with that. It's a little bit sort of, I want to say clunky in here. Can you see it sort of pixelated a little bit in here? But I can work with that if I use either the denoise again, or I can just do some minus structure and just paint it into the background, right? Or I had another idea for this one yet, which was to actually just go ahead and use some additional bokeh. Something is going on with my tools right now. Excuse me. You can see that when I'm painting, excuse me, you can see when I'm painting, my cursor disappears. And I don't know why. See there, it's there again, the little circle. And then as soon as I move it, it's disappearing. So I don't know why it's doing that, but it's doing it. I can't seem to solve that right now. Right? So see how blurring out that background with the, you see what structure does? Right? So I just masked it off the butterfly and the flower real quickly. Right? I can check my mask. Let's just erase a little better. Okay, so let's just do that a little better. About like so. Okay, so that solves some of those problems. And then I'm going to go and add a bokeh layer. I could also erase this guy out here too, because it kind of bugs me. If I want to just get rid of this flower entirely. And the new Gen Erase is coming. That's another one of the new tools that's been announced. I don't know when it's coming, but it will be doing a lot more content aware fill. Taking a long time because I chose it to edit a large area. So I should have done a spot first. Plus I would get rid of these little mosquitoes and stuff in the background too. It's taking a long time. Okay, let me see while it's doing that. Have I missed any questions? We're talking about gardening again. Looks like a thistle. Yeah, for sure. Hey, Catherine. Glad to have you back, Catherine. We missed you as well. Nobody ever says ducking. Yes. Time to invest in a macro lens. It was shot with the 200 to 600 with the 2x teleconverter. Aha. Okay. Well, that will definitely put you far away. But look at what bokeh you get with that, right? And you don't necessarily have to invest in a macro lens. Rob, if you could please share. You already did. I was just going to ask him to share the ultimate guide in macro photography. And also, we should have another article on working with extension tubes. And that's part of the thing that I was going to suggest, actually. You can take like a 50 or 100 mil lens or an 85 or something, a basic zoom, and put an extension tube on it and make that lens focus closer and make it into a macro without the expense of buying a macro lens. Okay, so let me go back and see what it's done here. Okay, so it erased that for me. So let's do another erase. I just want to get rid of some of these little things in the background here. Okay, just like that. I'm going to leave the spider webs here. I think that adds an element of interest. And now I want to go and find a bokeh. Now I want one that has some green, and I don't know if I've got that one added in here. Ah, here we go, green and yellow. So I could do yellow bokeh or I could do green. I'm going to try the yellow one. It also has to do with the size of the bokeh too, because you can even change the color of it later. Remember, once we add it as a layer, we can change the color of that layer, okay? So there's the article on extension tubes, and there's the article on macro photography. And as Rob has indicated, if you are reading an article of mine or watching something here on YouTube, if you liked it, please share on your social media. It really, really helps us get the word out and find new people that need assistance. Kelly says, that's what you do. That's what she does. Extension tubes with a 50 as well as macro filters. You'll find that you'll get a better quality image from the extension tubes than the filters, Kelly, unless you've paid for some really, really good macro filters. After editing the raw file in Neo, how did you get it back to Lightroom? In this case, Ed, I actually exported it from Luminar as a TIFF. Because I wanted to be able to compare them, because I edited it in the standalone version of Neo, so I didn't take it over as the plugin. Okay, so I wasn't using Neo as a plugin. I exported a new version, and that's just because I wanted to use the raw tools on it. Okay, now I've got in a layer here. Let me just see how it's going to play out. I'm not sure if I like the arrangement of this one. Let's just go with it. Let's go with, do we like it there? I want more stuff over here. Yeah, I think I like it like that. Okay, so now I need to change the blend mode. It's usually going to end up somewhere in screen or lighten, right? Let's try these. Ooh, soft light's kind of cool, right? So soft light is kind of neat, right? Now I can adjust the opacity of the bokeh. And of course, I can also mask it off of our butterfly, right? So I can do a mask right here. And I'm literally just going to do the same thing. I'm going to erase it from the butterfly. So I might want it to overlap the flower a little bit. I'm just going to go right down the middle like that. Maybe a little bit there, maybe a little bit there. See, I'm trying to do it visually without my mouse working correctly, so it's a little bit weird. How does that work? Okay, that looks pretty good. So now it looks like the bokeh is behind the flower, which is the idea, right? So that's why I'm using the erase off the flower, because you want it to look like it's behind, right? So that looks pretty good. Right now, once I've applied it, okay, as a layer, we can edit this layer because it's added a bunch of contrast and saturation, right? I could also go into structure and either give the bokeh more structure or blur them out. I kind of like to blur them more, so we have some soft bokeh, right? We can also go into color and either shift the color, right? We can just do a hue shift, and in which case you start to get all kinds of neat colors. Or we can just shift the hue. For example, I could say, make the green more yellow, right? Make the yellow more orange. And then let's just desaturate the whole thing. Now remember, if I desaturate the whole thing, we're literally just putting on the tones, okay? So it's applying on top of the original image, right? We could also go do, that's interesting. That kind of does some interesting effects. I don't know why it's doing that, but I kind of like it. So I'm just going to go with that. We can also apply a LUT, right? Which will give us a different type of tonality, right? So I could go in here and do a mood. And let's see. I personally like sepia and ones that are sort of wooden, orangey, and so on. Let's go with smoky, something like that. And I think, I'm just going to guess here, if I bring down the highlights, I'll get more definition in the bokeh. Yeah, see that? See that? More definition between them, right? And I can also brighten the entire thing or darken the entire thing. Remember, this is applying to the entire layer, okay? So we can make them more subtle. We can shift the temperature around here as well. Okay. And keep our vibrance a little more gentle. And I think I'm going to go and lower the saturation on this bottom one as well. Because now that I've applied this other layer, I think it's the original one that is now overly too saturated. So we can do that with color, or we can do that with develop. Okay. See how that's applied? It's affecting everything. Okay, so I'm just going to dial the saturation down a little bit. And I'm actually going to lessen this vignette that I added earlier. Okay, so I'm going back a few steps, lessening the vignette, and then let's see where we're at with our color once it catches up. I missed a spot. Let's see. Okay, Marguerite says she uses extension tubes on an 85. Yes, that's a really, really good choice. Sorry if I didn't answer the rest of that question, Ed. I literally just imported it. So I exported it out of Luminar and I imported it into Lightroom. I did all of that before we started the live, just because it was time consuming. Okay, why is this not catching up for me? All right, let's give this a minute to catch up. There we go. Okay, so now I've toned down. I've toned down the color in the background image, right? And I still feel like it's maybe a little too blue, right? So I'm going to go in here. Actually, I'm going to go in color. So remember which layer you're on. You always have to check. I want to shift the hue of the green a little more this way. So see how that changes the background color? So I just want to go a little bit warmer. So it's a little bit more yellowy. Something like that. Okay, now I'm going to go back to this top layer and just soften it a bit. I feel like a texture might work well on this one as well. And that's something else that you can do with an image that's really grainy like that. You could actually just add the texture instead of trying to get rid of all of the grain. Just add a texture over top. You know, we could do like a painted texture or something that's a bit more rugged. I'm going to try this one. This one just has texture, and I'm going to get rid of the color. I'm going to desaturate it. So I literally just want this texture. Don't know which direction yet. Let's try. Yeah, see, overlay or soft light is usually the best for texture kind of overlays. And then all I'm going to do is convert this guy to black and white. Right? So once I've converted it to black and white, it's just giving us the texture. Okay? See that? So then we can decide, do we like the texture and which direction we want it to go. So where's the light coming from in the butterfly? It's fairly even. So I kind of want to give the texture something that matches. I kind of like that texture that's going on down here. So I'm going to go with something like that. Right? I also feel like we need to darken this corner. So I'm going to just go in and do a develop. And you'll see what I'm doing here in a minute. So I want to darken it. Oh, it's that bottom layer. The problem is this light corner up here. So I have to figure out which layer it's on and then solve the problem. So I'm going to go into this bottom layer, darken it, and also desaturate it. And then I'm just going to mask it in with a linear gradient on this corner because I just want to darken this corner. Okay, so I'm just going to do it like that. Okay, so see what that's doing? It's just darkening that corner. Okay, now once I've got it where I want it, I can just adjust it. Something like that. I'm going to take a little more saturation out of it. Okay, so there we go. There's the original. And then we've created something very artsy. So I spent a little bit more time on this one because there was some things that I thought we could talk about in terms of the noise reduction, getting noise reduction in camera. If you could please share that article as well, how to, please, Rob, on how to avoid noise in the first place. Then also we dealt with denoising in the processing stage, and then also adding some other effects which could cover the noise up if we prefer, right? So this bokeh is a little bit heavy for me. I actually might prefer to go with something a little bit less, or we can mask it a little bit more. But I don't want to spend any more time on this one. You've got some ideas of what direction you can go with this one, Brandon. Okay. He likes it. Awesome. All right. So you've got some ideas. Kelly likes it as well. Okay, cool. All right. So let's go back and do another one. We have a question? I already answered that question, Rob. I asked him how I imported it back into Lightroom. Yep, I already answered that. You were probably doing something else. Okay, back to Lightroom. Most of you that submitted images are using Lightroom or Luminar. I want to do one of Neo's, and also I want to do Marguerite's. So Marguerite is using Lightroom, so that's what we're going to use. And she says this is some kind of a seed pod. I think Rob said he knew what it was. So the first thing we're always going to do is color. Okay, so this is an NEF, so that is a Nikon file. And I can see right out of the gate, just by looking at them, that the landscape one is going to give us more punch. Okay, so I'm going to choose landscape just from the thumbnails. And then we're going to do the shift double click thing. And I'm going to make a video on this of just doing this, because I can't tell you how many times I talk about this, and it's Rob was asking me to try and define it, like what's the point of the shift double click, and it's to I mean, the literal definition is to set the black point and the white point, but what does that mean, right? It changed the contrast. Okay, so look at how white the background is now, right? We're still not clipping anything, so if I hold my Alt Option key, I'm going to dial it back just a tiny bit. And we've got black now, which is clipping, right? I'm going to dial that back a little bit. And now we've actually got some serious color in this thing, right? So all I did was shift double click on these things and a small adjustment, and we've quickly punched up everything, okay? This one, I might want to crop it a little bit because it looks like we've just got the end of the stem. So I'm going to come in a little bit more. And let's put this guy off center. I'm going something like that. And for some reason, I feel like I want to flip it because I want the stem to be coming into the image. Here we go. See what I mean? I want the stem to come this way as opposed to this way. So it's like you're leading your eye into the image, right? We could also flip it upside down, but I don't know if that's going to work. Let's see what happens. No, that just looks weird, right? So right out of the gate, we've got something to work with, right? In terms of ISO again, let's see. Can I get this to show up on here? No. So this one here is ISO 1250. So same question, Marguerite. Why did you use a high ISO? I know why you used f16. Okay, so if I go back here, we should be able to see the information. There we go. I know why you used f16 because you wanted more depth of field. When you come in closer, your depth of field is very shallow. And then we're to 15th of a second though, right? So based on that and the fact that you used an 85 mil lens, tells me that you probably or most likely used a tripod. Okay, so if you did use a tripod, the question then is why the high ISO? Okay, because your high ISO is lowering the quality of the image, whereas you could have shot at ISO 200, a longer shutter speed, because this thing's not moving, right, and get a clearer image. Because as you increase the ISO, not only do you get noise, but you lose sharpness, right? As the ISO goes up, your sharpness goes down, color saturation goes down, and noise goes up, right? As well as detail goes down. So your image degrades the higher the ISO gets, right? All right, let's go back over here. Right now, I'm going to give it a little bit more yellow because I feel like it's probably, I find that green that looks like this is too neon, right? I want it to be a little bit more yellowy. That looks better. And we could play with this. Actually, giving it a bit more magenta. See what happens when we add green to this? It kind of goes neon. So I think actually a little more magenta gives us a more natural, realistic looking green. Can you see that? Okay, if I go back to history, let me go to the history here before I adjusted the color. Okay, so there's before the color is adjusted and after. It just feels like a more realistic, natural color to me. Right? Given that it's on a white background, you could also try the eyedropper. Okay? And depending where you click it, you're going to get slightly different results. Right? Let's go with something like that. Okay, so the question becomes then, what else do you want to do with this? How much more can you do? All right, you could definitely do some denoise, right? And as it says, the new image will be saved as a new DNG, and you can see the amount of noise here, right? But let's just see what happens if we just use the regular tools, see if we can get away with that. And we definitely need a little bit of sharpening to compensate. Right. See how it starts to look blurry when you add a lot of denoise in the traditional way? Right. So let's try this denoise here. So if I hit this, it's going to give us a dialog box. And the denoise AI in Lightroom is pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. There's really not much to do with it. You can't zoom in or out. It literally just shows you this view. You can move it around. As you can see, it takes forever for it to even do anything. Oh, there's a spike. Okay. So I was looking for something that I want to be sharp. Okay. So it takes forever to move it around. But if we sort of, do the before and after, right, we can see what it's doing in terms of noise reduction. And the more noise you reduce, the blurrier the whole thing gets. Okay. So I'm going to go somewhere about there, somewhere in the 50, 60, and do an enhance. Right? And you'll see how long this takes. Right? So it's going to take quite a while. You'll see it appear up here in the upper left corner as to what's happening. So anything that you've got as a process that's happening, Lightroom shows you this progress bar. Okay, so you can see how long it's going to take. Okay, so Marguerite says, I shot it in a light box indoors, $2 ammo ring lights and a macro light, but the lights weren't strong enough for the room I was in, right? But did you use a tripod is the question, okay? So if you used the tripod, it doesn't matter how strong the lights are. It matters where you put them, right? Because you've also got very even lighting on a subject here that has lots of texture. So it's kind of evened out all the texture. If you just went with one light from one side, you would get more texture and lower the ISO, right? So here, let me do this again. My computer is doing weird things right now. Okay, let's do that. All right, try this. I seem to be like skipping here. So if you had one light coming from the side, and you shot it that way on a tripod, let the ISO be 200 and just let the shutter speed go to whatever it goes to, okay? We do have an article, but the only one I did using the light box was glassware. So no, not really. You can look, Rob. So if you did use a tripod, then for sure, just as soon as you go to a tripod, the only reason to use a high ISO when you're on tripod is doing stars. That's it. Okay, so if you're at night and you're shooting stars, you need a high ISO, or you're not going to get anything. Okay, but any other reason when you're on a tripod, turn the ISO down. Right, 200. Yeah, there's something weird going on with the videos here right now. I don't know if it's internet or if it's just me. How to avoid noise article. I will look for that, Rob. Give me a second. Okay, so it looks like it's made the new file. Let me just find the denoise article. And I'm going to zoom in on these guys here. Okay, so let's have a look here. There's how to do noise reduction. There's a software comparison. It might be in that one, Rob. So do the noise reduction software comparison one. I think it's in there because that's, yeah, I think that's all I got. All right, so let's take a look here. This is the new one. So if we compare, let's zoom out to 100%. Let's do a comparison to the original here. Okay, remember, C is a comparison mode. Okay, so the Nikon NEF is on the left. Ooh, it definitely looks sharper. Look at that. Definitely noise is reduced, looks sharp. Okay, so it's done a good job. So far, I'm actually really impressed with the Lightroom noise reduction. I may be using it, maybe using it more often myself. Okay, so I'm not sure what else you could do with something like this. It's pretty simple and straightforward, right? You could add a white vignette to it if you wanted to. Okay, so instead of going to the left, you just go to the right. Right, you can come in a little bit, and all it's going to do is sort of make the edges white, like so. Okay, so it just feathers out this stem at the bottom here. Okay, but otherwise, I'm not really sure there's much else that you could do with this one. If you want to fix up, some of the blemishes on it, that's up to you. Okay, but that solves some of the sharpening issues and also the noise. Okay, so once again, noise reduction. Let's just take a look at some of these other images because I want to see what everybody's using for settings. Okay, so here's another one of Brandon's. F11, 1600 ISO, right? So F11 has got your background a lot more in focus than it could be if you shot this at, say, F4, Brandon. Okay, so keep in mind when you're doing candid things like this, yes, you have to sacrifice a little bit, maybe sharpness on the subject, but trying to get the body and the head sharp, and that background will go a lot more out of focus. Right? We already looked at these. Hey, Neil, F16, ISO 800, 1/250th. Okay, so again, we're at F16. Everybody's doing lots of small aperture numbers. Okay, this is a great image. Let's do this one. And Neil says either. So I'm going to work on this one in Lightroom. Also F16. And one of Brandon's, F6.3. Okay, so see the difference how the background is really starting to fall out of focus? Right, makes a big difference. I want to do a couple of different edits of this one, 2 different ways. Okay, so when I first saw this one, I thought, okay, it's got a lot of contrast between the dandelion tuft and the background. So I think this would make a really great black and white because of the contrast, right? Sometimes that's what I look for in terms of what goes black and white. But let's work with... the camera profile, and I'm seeing these are all less contrasty. Let's go with standard. Adobe was actually pretty good. And let's do our shift double click. Okay, now noticing it lowered the whites, I'm going to actually bring it up and then just bring the highlights back down a bit. Okay, if I'm clipping a little bit on the middle of those dandelion bits, I'm okay with that. Okay. Now I'm going to use my preset that I've showed you before. Mask, subject, and background. So all it does is selects them and masks them. Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at the mask. So it hasn't applied any editing. Okay, so subject. So notice it hasn't found, the inner parts of the background there, which I suspected. But this is okay because I want to add texture here and clarity. So see how that is bringing out the dandelion, right? Making it really stand out. And then likewise on the background, we can lower texture and clarity a little bit, or even sharpness, okay? But I can also do minus highlights because I want to see if it'll take care of some of these things in the background here, okay? And we can add black, okay? So I could darken the exposure, but remember when we add black, it gives you that richness, okay? So I'm going to bring the highlights down and something like that. I'm actually bringing the shadows up so I can have some more detail. And let's do a little bit less color. Just tiny bit less saturation. Right, now notice I haven't applied a vignette or anything, and it's got some really deep, rich contrast, right? So partly it was the way that it was photographed with the subject being lit and the background being dark. This thing here still bugs me, right? So I'm going to use the content aware fill brush, and I'm going to paint over this area here. It's going to try and fill it and use content aware fill. See, it's analyzing, right? Now, am I happy with that? It's not bad, but I don't want to get rid of that thing entirely. I want some texture in the background, so I'm just going to dial it down a little bit. Okay. Let's actually just move that up and over. It's reanalyzing. So all I did was dial the opacity down a bit, so it's darkening that spot without completely removing it. Right? I could do the same with any of these as well. Say this stem here, I want to keep just one stem. So let's see how that does. Pretty good. Okay, I'm happy with that. Oops. That's not what I meant to do. Oh, it's telling me, when you see this little red thing here, right, for some reason it's telling me it needs to update one of the AI masks, okay? So it's giving us a red thing here and saying, okay, we have to go and reselect those things. Okay, so if you see this little red dot under the masking tool, it means that some of the masks which were AI need to be readjusted, right? Now I'm going to back this black off just a little bit. Okay, so see how that's minimizing those problems in the background? Now I'm going to make a virtual copy, and let's do a black and white of this one. Right. So Command or Control apostrophe for a virtual copy, and let's go black and white. Okay. So now you could see what I saw. I love this contrast. And I'll let it go black, black, black. Okay. If you want a warm tone black and white, remember to use color grading. I like to use just the shadows and set your saturation minimal, and then your color somewhere in this yellow to orange range. Right? You can move it around here, or you can do the slider. Right? See how brown it is, but just keeping your saturation around about 25. What it does is it gives you what I call just a warm black. Okay. Also, you could do something the opposite direction. You could do cool. Okay. So totally up to you. You could also do a split tone. Okay, so we could do cool shadows. Okay, so the background, cool. And remember, we can also adjust luminance here. Okay, so this is the shadows. We can darken the shadows. And then we could do highlights on the other end of the spectrum. Highlights yellow. Ooh, that's kind of cool. See? Now, ooh, doesn't that kind of look like the moon? Right? Think about, apparently there's a jumbo blue moon tonight, but think about how the moon is sort of yellow usually and the night is blue. Think of this, it looks like the moon to me, right? With some texture and stuff. Okay, squint your eyes a little bit. I'm using my imagination. Let's see what kind of questions we've got here. Okay, so back to Marguerite's question. I'm just going to go back to her image again. So she says, initially, I tried to take the image outdoors where I found the pods on the vine and on a vine that cluttered on my raspberry bush. But I was working in the Ontario equivalent of the jungle. Yes, I know Ontario can be humid. Is that what you're saying? A little bit humid, right? So the idea of the light table is not a bad one, and it definitely gives you more control. Just think about direction of light, right? And quality of light. Because with the light box, when you light it from all directions, what you end up with is just flat light. So when you have an interesting subject like this, if you've still got some out in your garden, go grab another one and just play with one light, okay? So my challenge to you, Marguerite, is to play with one light. You don't even have to put it in the light box, to be honest. Put it on the table. Just put it on the table, something simple, and just move the light around it and watch. Just watch. Even take pictures with your phone or take a few pictures on the tripod, set it up on the tripod, and then move the light around and see what that does. Do you remember the article we did on the pumpkins where I had the playing with light painting, Rob? You could even do something like that with this one, Marguerite. Okay, so find that article where I talked about, it's a challenge playing with light, and it's got the pumpkins, Rob. See if you can find that one, right? Let's see. I like the texture on the edited file. I like the vignette, what makes the pod looks like floating. Yeah, so use that white vignette. There you go. You made one of those presets? Awesome. Okay, so they select subject and background. Awesome. Way to go. Let's see. I'm looking at that. Okay, so Neil said when the wind was blowing, it was gone within a half an hour. Okay, so we're going back to his little dandelion. Yes, okay, so it would. Yes, definitely. I likely have 1,000 watt, Rob. So keep that in mind a lot, Marguerite. When you have a subject like that that's at your disposal and you have more of them, right? Try something. And if you're not happy with it, even if you are happy with it, go get another one and try again. Okay. It's about experimenting, play with light, play with going black and white. Okay. And what did you mean by I likely have 1,000? Not sure what that means. If you want to explain. Okay. All right. So Neil's dandelion, which has now become like the moon. I like this version a lot. All right. Now, I said I was going to do this one in Luminar as well because I want to see if we take this one into the studio light, if it will recognize this as a subject, okay, and see what happens here. Okay. All right, so the studio light has now moved down to the portrait section, as I mentioned earlier, right? And it's now, you have to drag the amount up first, and it gives you these sort of squares here, meaning you can add more than one iteration. So when you add one, okay, I'm going to give it a bit of contrast. When you add one, you can go one from one direction. So for example, I could add the light coming from this way, right? So I could almost highlight it from here. Okay. And there's some adjustments that you can make with it. I'll cover that in a video that I'm going to make coming up. Right? But the neat thing is it allows you to actually adjust the background as well. Okay, so I'm just kind of playing with this so that I'm not blasting out the poor dandelion. So I've got my J key activated to see the clippings. Okay. Now I showed you the little dog, right? Okay. So with the little dog, I added color. So you can actually, right? So I could say, okay, I want yellow over here. Right. And I want this a bit smoother. Okay, so now I've got yellow sort of coming from this direction, right? Now if I add another one, and let's say I want blue this time coming from this direction. And I might do this one a little bit differently. So maybe this one I want a bit more shallow and have a different effect. Maybe let's go green. The blue's not showing up. Okay, so now you can see even the dot is green. I can move it around. I get a very different effect. Kind of like that. The lighting contrast one is actually really neat because it reminds me of sun rays when you do sort of the sun rays effect, right? This one also can do strips, right? So you can change it to strips of light or spots of light. Like so. So we can get really creative, okay, with our little dandelion. Okay, now I've got another idea because now I'm thinking magic light. Where's magic light? I don't even know where it is. Oh, it's missing. Ah, interesting. Interesting. My magic light is missing. That was one that came in a while ago. Oh, there it is. Forgot. It's an extension. Okay, here we go. Okay, so now magic light could turn these into stars. Right, so I can make them glow. More, there we go. More like stars. Like so. Let's go 6 beams. Okay, so we've kind of gone off the rails now, but I'm just experimenting with what you can do with these tools, right? So when you have a subject like this that is really interesting, right, you can use these tools. And I kind of said that in my last video when I talked about these new things that were coming is, am I going to use neon glow ever? Well, guess what? I might on this image, right? Because now that I've added the studio light and I made it sort of glow, I might want a little neon glow around the outside of the dandelion and make it into something really cool, right? We could add bokeh to the background here as well, you know? So really interesting image, and it's actually really fun to play with this and play with the different tools. I seem to be on fire with bokeh lately, but we could even just do a light leak. Let's just see what that looks like. Let's just see if there's one that's maybe something like this. That's kind of cool. I mean, and this is one that just comes with Luminar, right? So we can just add that. I like that it matches the direction here of the light. No, it was better the first time. Right? So we could do something like that. So we've taken this image from that, a basic old dandelion, to outer space, kind of. Okay. And I actually kind of like this. It's fun. It's fun to experiment, and a cover like this as well. So see what you can come up with using these various tools, right? Use your own creativity and just try the new tools as they come out. Studio Light will be available tomorrow for those of you that have the subscription plan. And if you haven't got the subscription plan, let me come back on screen here. If you don't have the subscription plan, and you need to either upgrade. So there's been a lot of confusion about pricing around this new update and so on. And what I might do is a webinar just to answer a few questions for people that are not sure as to what they have and so on. And I'm not even sure I have all the answers, but I'm going to try the best I can. So if you have any questions about the new pricing, do fire me an email or put a comment in the comment area below if you're watching this video later. And do please remember to give our videos a thumbs up and share them with your social media sites, as Rob said. Yeah, it is a Death Star. Let me go back to that one, Neil, because that's exactly it. Yeah. So I could definitely either of those, definitely very sci-fi. I like it. Okay. Thanks, Neil. It was a fun image to play with. And that's kind of the neat thing for me is because these aren't my images, I have no preconceived idea as to where it might go. So it's actually been a lot of fun for me using this, weekly live to experiment. Right? Okay, we're at an hour. Let's see if there's something else I can do as a copy and paste or something quickly. Yeah, the rest are Luminar, and those are branded. So I'm going to save those, Brandon, because I'm going to save them. We might do insects one day as well. So I'm going to save those. And your other one, Neil, with the flower, I'm going to throw into our floral category. So for next week, we're actually going to be doing landscape. So submit your photos for landscape. There we go. Using this link and just landscape in general. Okay, so this could be a nighttime landscape. If you go out and photograph the moon tonight or the next couple of nights when the moon is rather full, you could go and photograph a daytime landscape. A cityscape is considered a landscape as well, so it could be urban or rural. Studio Light is currently in beta. I have a beta version, but as I said, Brennan, it's shipping tomorrow for everybody that's pre-ordered it. Okay, so if you have a current monthly subscription, you will get the Studio Light. So you'll probably see an email. I'm not sure where it rolls out or in which countries, but you'll get an email saying that there's an updated version available. Once you update your Luminar, it will be there, same place as where you see mine. It is not an extension, it is a tool, but that's the only one that is coming out tomorrow. The other ones they've said coming out over the fall, and those are like the 5 or 6 others that they announced last week. So that's Generace, Gen Expand. I forget the names of all of them. The ones that will expand the canvas and so on, right? So the ones that are coming out with the AI to start doing things like replacing elements in your image, okay? All right, so landscape photos, please submit. So the tripod is on is behind me. My camera is sitting on the table beside me. So my camera is right here because I had a lesson yesterday with actually no, it was a Monday. I had a lesson on Monday with my student who is in Nicaragua. So she's our girl that we've been sponsoring to help her go through school, and she's in university. and she's part of the photography club there. And now she is teaching photography to the younger kids. So I was giving her some tips, and my camera was off the tripod. And I thought, I had this sign out. And I thought I would just leave it there. So for those of you that don't speak Spanish, what that means is believe in yourself and everything will be possible. Literally, it says everything will be possible. Okay, so that's what that means. Thanks, Rob, for posting all the names of those. So scene extend, gen erase, scene swap, neon and glow, which I mentioned, and water enhancer. So I'm really keen on seeing what the water enhancer is going to do. I saw a early preview of that actually back in April when I was in Portugal with the team, and it looked really cool then. So I'm really eager to get my hands on that one. But as usual, I will be doing some videos once I get my hands on a beta copy, and that will go up here on the YouTube channel so that you'll be able to see what's coming. And then as soon as we have new tools available, there will be a full tutorial. And as well, if you have the Luminar course, make note of this, please, Rob. I need to start doing videos to add to the course as well. So I'm going to call it a night. I don't know about Rob, but I feel like having some pizza tonight. It feels like a pizza and a bottle of wine night for me. So I'm going to say good night. Please submit your landscape images. And remember to share these with your friends. Share the link with your photography friends, your camera clubs. I want to get more images submitted so that more people can have this experience of having their image edited. Tell them that, Neil and Brandon and Marguerite, tell your friends that I edited your image and I created the Death Star out of a dandelion. So I'm quite happy with my creation of that tonight. So do share and take care. We'll see you next week for landscape photos.